It really feels like no matter what industry you're in these days, you just got to be ready for anything.
Oh, absolutely.
Just look at how organizations are having to constantly adapt and overcome all these unexpected challenges.
Mm.
I mean, it's clear that resilience has become absolutely essential. And we've all seen how the world can just throw curveballs our way, haven't we?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, without getting into specifics, it's fair to say that disruptions of all shapes and sizes have basically become like a regular part of doing business.
Yeah, they're the new normal.
So that's exactly what we're going to dive into today.
Yeah.
We're going deep into business continuity management, BCM for short, and how it all ties into the bigger picture of enterprise risk management, ERM.
Right, BCM and ERM. So we've got this really fascinating article we're going to unpack. It really goes deep on the whole concept of BCM and how it's like intertwined with ERM. And for anyone listening out there, I think this is going to be super relevant to you, whether you're, in the trenches trying to plan for the future, or maybe you're trying to understand how your company handles risks, or even if you're just curious about how businesses stay afloat when things get really crazy. This deep dive is going to give you some serious insights.
I'm ready.
Our mission here is to really distill the key takeaways from this article. We're going to talk about BCM and ERM, how they work together, and why they matter so much for making organizations, truly resilient.
Awesome. Let's do it.
Right. Let's jump in.
So the article kicks off by looking back at how our whole idea of resilience has evolved over time. It wasn't always this, broad concept that we consider so crucial today, was it?
Yeah, that's a great point. If we rewind back to the 90s and the early 2000s, the focus on resilience was really driven by governments and local authorities, right?
Okay.
They were mostly focused on preparing for big emergencies like, natural disasters or huge civil disruptions.
Yeah, makes sense. So things like widespread power outages or, devastating floods.
Exactly, those massive high-impact events.
Right.
But as time went on, the idea of resilience really started to expand.
Yep.
It became a much broader concept. It wasn't just about those catastrophic scenarios anymore. It began to encompass a whole range of potential problems that could disrupt how an organization operates. And we see this shift reflected in the evolution of international standards, too.
Yeah, the article talks about that switch from British standard BS 25999 to ISO 22301. What was the big change in thinking there?
Yeah, so BS 25999, which came out in 2006, was really focused on business continuity as this internal function, right? Like,
Yeah.
how does a company keep things running smoothly within its own walls? But ISO 23301, which replaced it in 2012, took a much wider perspective. It put equal emphasis on societal security and business continuity management. So it's not just about you anymore. It's about your place in the bigger picture. Your community's resilience depends on your resilience too, and vice versa. Think about all the ways your business relies on local infrastructure and the people around you.
So it's about that interconnectedness. You're not an island.
Exactly. And then you've got other standards like the Organizational Resilience Standard, ACES SPC 1-2009.
Right, the article mentioned that one. What's special about that one?
That standard really emphasizes an enterprise-wide view of risk management.
Love it.
It pushes organizations to think about resilience holistically, integrating it into every single aspect of their operations.
And I noticed it ties into ISO 31000, the main risk management standard, and aligns with other ISO standards, like ISO 9001 for quality management and ISO 27001 for information security.
Exactly. They're really pushing for a unified approach. It's all connected.
Makes total sense. Everything's intertwined. So the core idea is that a truly resilient organization has to do a few things really well.
Yeah.
They've got to prevent, protect, and prepare. But they also got to be ready to respond, recover, and review. It's like a full circle.
It's the whole life cycle, yeah.
Now, the article also pulls out the definition of resilience from ISO 20300. It says it's an organization's ability to adapt in a constantly changing environment.
Right.
But it also makes a point that this includes crisis management for those big, scary events and handling those smaller hiccups that happen along the way. So it's not just about prepping for the apocalypse.
Yeah, that's a key point.
Right.
It's not just about surviving those black swan events, those massive things that nobody sees coming. It's also about being able to handle those everyday disruptions, the smaller bumps in the road that can still really mess things up.
Absolutely.
And I think this broader definition really highlights the need for risk management and business continuity folks to work closely together.
Collaborate.
Yeah.
Because it's about building a culture of preparedness for anything that comes your way, big or small.
Exactly.
The article then lays out 3 key behaviors for achieving resilience. It says organizations need to stay aware, protect, and prepare their resources and be able to respond quickly and adapt. Can you unpack those a bit more?
Yeah, for sure. So staying aware, that's all about having your finger on the pulse. You got to be constantly monitoring what's happening both inside and outside your organization.
Okay.
Keep your eyes peeled for any signs of trouble, anything that could disrupt your operations. Early warning signs are super valuable. Then there's protecting and preparing your resources.
Right.
This goes beyond just having a plan written down somewhere. You actually have to test your defenses, make sure you've got the resources you need to handle a real crisis. And finally, being able to respond quickly and adapt, that's about agility. You need to be flexible, able to adjust your plans on the fly when things don't go according to the script.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, they rarely do.
Never do, right.
Exactly.
And it seems like those frameworks we often hear about, like the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle, PDCA, and the Plan, Implement, Measure, Learn approach, PIML from ISO 31000, they really support this idea of continuous improvement and resilience.
Definitely. They both emphasize that resilience is not just a box you tick. It's not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing journey. You're always learning, adapting, and getting better.
Yeah, always evolving.
Always evolving.
Okay, the article also talks about the guidance from the UK government's Cabinet Office on building stronger resilience and how important it is for organizations to embed resilience into their governance.
Okay.
Why is that so crucial to have it addressed at the very top at the board level?
Well, when resilience is baked into the governance, it means those top-level decision makers are really thinking about the risks to their operations.
Okay.
It's not just some side project for a specific team. It becomes a fundamental priority that influences big decisions about investments, suppliers, and the whole supply chain.
So it's not just a department, it's a philosophy.
Exactly. It's part of the organization's DNA. And that brings us to business continuity management itself, BCM.
Okay, BCM.
Right. The article pulls out this definition from British Standard BS 31101. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it describes BCM as a holistic management process that identifies potential threats to an organization and the impacts to business operations that those threats, if realized, might cause, and which provides a framework for building organizational resilience and the capability for an effective response that safeguards the interests of its key stakeholders, reputation, brand, and value-creating activities.
Wow, okay. A lot to unpack there. So what are the key takeaways from that?
I think the most important things about BCM is holistic, meaning it looks at all the possible threats out there.
Okay.
It's impact-centric, so it really focuses on the consequences of those threats. And most importantly, it's all about proactively building resilience to protect those things that matter most to an organization. Its people, its reputation, its brand, and its ability to keep creating value,
Right.
safeguarding those core elements.
The article emphasizes how BCM is a crucial piece of the larger ERM puzzle.
Yeah, it's a vital component.
How do those two disciplines fit together?
Think of ERM as the big umbrella.
Okay.
It's the overall framework for identifying, assessing, and managing all the risks that could stop an organization from achieving its goals. BCM then zooms in on those specific risks that could interrupt daily operations.
So ERM is like identifying all the potential storms, and BCM is about having a plan to weather those storms.
That's a perfect analogy. BCM provides those structured plans, processes, and procedures to keep essential functions running during and after a disruptive event. Whether it's a natural disaster, a cyber attack, a major supply chain issue, BCM has you covered. It works hand in hand with ERM, not only by mitigating the immediate impact of a crisis, but also by making sure the recovery strategies align with the organization's overall risk appetite and its strategic goals.
It's about bouncing back in a way that makes sense for the big picture.
Exactly. Aligning your response with your goals.
So let's get practical. What does implementing BCM actually look like on the ground?
Okay, so in practice, BCM involves a few key activities.
Right.
First, you got to identify those critical business processes, the ones that are absolutely essential. Then you need to assess all the potential threats that could disrupt those processes.
Yeah.
Next, you develop strategies to keep those critical functions running during a disruption, or to restore them quickly if they go down. And finally, you create and thoroughly test your business continuity plans, or BCPs, and your disaster recovery plans, or DRPs.
Right. BCPs and DRPs. We hear those terms all the time, but can you break them down for us? What's the difference?
Yeah, so think of the BCP as your overall strategy for keeping the business alive after a major disruption. It's the high-level plan.
Sure.
So for instance, if your office building is flooded, your BCP will outline how you'll operate from a temporary location, how you'll keep employees connected, and how you'll continue serving your customers.
It's the roadmap.
Exactly. Now, the DRP, on the other hand, is more focused. It's all about getting your critical IT systems back online.
So it's more tactical.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So while the BCP might say we need to shift to remote work, the DRP will detail the specific steps for restoring servers, data, applications, all that tech stuff. Disaster recovery is really a subset of the overall business continuity plan.
It's a piece of the puzzle.
Right. And then you also have crisis management, which is all about that immediate response to an event and how you communicate with the outside world.
Right. Getting that message out.
Exactly. Keeping everyone informed.
The article gives that example of a printing firm that partnered with a mobile emergency computer service just in case their IT systems went down.
Yeah, a good example of BCM in action.
It's planning for the what-ifs.
Exactly. Being prepared.
And there's this ongoing debate about whether BCP and DRP are corrective or directive controls. What's the general consensus?
Well, the article argues that while BCP and DRP don't actually prevent incidents from happening, they are absolutely essential for managing the fallout and minimizing the damage.
Okay.
They're corrective in the sense that they address the consequences. The analogy they use is a seatbelt.
Right.
A seatbelt doesn't stop a car crash, but it can significantly reduce the harm if one happens.
It's about mitigating the impact.
Exactly.
Okay, so the article breaks down BCP into 3 distinct stages: crisis management, disaster recovery, and long-term business continuity.
Right. 3 phases.
Can you walk us through those using that example of a major road accident that they give?
Sure. So let's say there's a major road accident. The first stage, crisis management, is all about the immediate response.
Okay.
Think emergency services arriving on the scene, attending to the injured, securing the area.
All right.
Then you move into disaster recovery, which focuses on restoring essential infrastructure.
Okay.
In this case, it would be clearing the wreckage, repairing the road, making it usable again.
Getting things back to some kind of normal.
Exactly. And then finally, there's the long-term business continuity phase, which is all about getting traffic flow back to normal and addressing any lingering effects of the accident.
And for a business that's directly affected,
Mhm.
like a transport company, for example, crisis management would also involve that public-facing side of things.
Exactly.
Demonstrating social responsibility, offering support to those who are impacted by the accident.
Yeah, that community aspect is important, showing you care.
Okay, so that breakdown really clarifies those different phases.
Yeah.
Now, let's switch gears and talk about business continuity standards. The article throws out a whole bunch of them. Why are these standards so important for organizations?
Well, these standards give organizations a framework. They provide a set of best practices and guidelines for developing, implementing, and maintaining effective business continuity management systems.
Okay.
They promote consistency and a comprehensive approach to preparedness and recovery.
So it's not just about winging it. There's a structure there.
Exactly. There's a proven path to follow.
ISO 22301 seems to be the gold standard now.
Yeah.
The one that replaced BS 25999. Why has it become so prominent?
ISO 22301 has become the internationally recognized standard for BCMS because it's so comprehensive.
Okay.
It covers everything from identifying critical business functions and potential risks to developing solid continuity strategies, setting up clear communication protocols, and making sure the entire system is regularly tested and reviewed. It's the benchmark.
It's a gold standard, yeah.
Exactly.
Now, you've also got ISO 223313, which the article describes as guidance to support ISO 22301. So one provides the structure, and the other gives practical advice on how to actually implement it.
That's exactly it. ISO 223333 goes deeper. It offers more explanations, practical insights, and best practice recommendations to help organizations put those ISO 223301 requirements into action.
So it's like the instruction manual.
Yeah, the how-to guide.
The article mentions a whole slew of other standards, too. NFPA 1600, ASIS SPC.1 2009, ITIL COBIT, even U.S. federal standards like FIPS 199 and 200.
Right.
It seems like different industries and regions might have their own specific standards to follow, right?
Absolutely. While ISO 22311 is that general, widely applicable framework, certain industries, like healthcare, finance, or energy, often have extra regulations or standards specific to their unique risks and operational environments.
Yeah, they've got their own challenges.
Exactly.
And then we see ISO 31000 mentioned again, emphasizing that BCM should always be rooted in risk assessment.
Right. Tying it back to that bigger picture.
And there's also the DRII professional practices, which seem to offer a more hands-on approach for those working in business continuity. It's quite a landscape of standards and guidelines.
It is a diverse landscape, but there's a lot of common ground.
Yeah.
The key principles often overlap. And the way ISO 22301 is structured, aligning it with other management system standards, and unshifting the PDCA cycle or the similar PML approach from ISO 31000 makes it easier for organizations to integrate it all.
It's about making it work together.
Exactly. The standard lays out a clear life cycle. You start by identifying the risks. Then you figure out your organization's specific needs. Then you set up and maintain your BCMS. You rigorously evaluate how you handle disruptions, and you make sure you're sticking to the established policies.
It's a continuous process.
Absolutely. Ongoing improvement. It's also interesting that the article points out how ISO 22301 shifted away from that focus on preventive action towards a more proactive stance of actions to address risks and opportunities.
Yeah, it's about being more forward-thinking.
Exactly. It's not just about stopping bad things from happening.
Right.
It's about looking for opportunities to strengthen your resilience and maybe even gain a competitive advantage by being prepared. The emphasis on setting clear goals, tracking performance, and using metrics further emphasizes the strategic importance of business continuity.
Okay, so let's talk about successful BCPs. What does a really effective BCP look like, according to the article?
So a good BCP should be a few things.
Okay.
First, it needs to be comprehensive, covering all your essential operations and locations.
You got to be thorough.
Exactly. It also has to be cost-effective, meaning you're not spending a fortune on things that are unlikely to happen. It needs to be practical and easy for your staff to understand and use.
User-friendly.
Right. It has to be effective, meaning it actually achieves its objectives. And it needs to be well-maintained and regularly updated to reflect any changes in your business.
Keeping it fresh.
And most importantly, it has to be practiced.
Yeah, you got to put it to the test.
Exactly. Through testing and realistic exercises. You can have the best plan in the world, but if you haven't practiced it, you don't know if it's going to work when it really matters.
It's like a fire drill. You might think it's a hassle, but you'll be glad you did it when the real thing happens.
Absolutely.
The article gives a good list of those key activities involved in BCP, like assessing critical resources, identifying key contacts, planning for inaccessible facilities, and making sure you can still pay your employees, even during a disruption.
Right. Those are the essentials. You need to think through everything your business needs to function and then come up with contingency plans for each of those elements. It's about considering both your internal resources and those crucial external partners like suppliers and customers.
All connected.
Exactly. And you need to be clear about who does what, both in developing the plan and when it needs to be put into action.
Who's in charge?
Right. You also need to coordinate with external parties like local authorities or emergency services and things like payroll continuity. That's often overlooked, but it's crucial for keeping employees happy and preventing further disruption.
Yeah, people still need to get paid.
Exactly. Imagine the chaos if your staff suddenly couldn't access their money.
That would add fuel to the fire.
It would, wouldn't it?
Ugh.
So yeah, a good BCP is simple, effective, regularly tested, and understood by everyone involved.
It's about clarity and preparedness.
Absolutely.
Okay, now, the article talks about a major real-world event that really tested business continuity plans,
Mm-hmm.
the COVID-19 pandemic.
Right, a global stress test.
That really showed how crucial BCPs are, didn't it?
Oh, it was a wake-up call. The pandemic was a huge reminder of just how important business continuity planning is across every single industry and every part of the world. It showed us that having a well-developed and maintained BCP could be the difference between surviving and going under.
It was a sink or swim moment for a lot of organizations.
It really was.
The article gives some great examples of how BCP was vital during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Things like shifting to remote work, managing those supply chain disruptions by finding new suppliers, and making sure employees were safe and healthy.
Absolutely. Companies that already had remote work policies and the tech infrastructure in place could transition much more smoothly. Organizations that had diversified their supply chains didn't get hit as hard when things went sideways.
It's about spreading the risk.
Exactly. And having clear communication strategies in their BCPs meant they could maintain customer trust during a very uncertain time.
It's about staying connected.
Yeah, absolutely.
The article also points to financial resilience, being able to quickly change business models, and the speed of recovery as key benefits for organizations with strong BCPs. It was like having a solid foundation to navigate those crazy times.
It was like having a lifeline.
Right.
Yeah.
And that timeline example of the broadcasting company dealing with a major incident that really showed how DRP and BCP work together in the real world.
Yeah, good illustration.
You see that progression from emergency response and IT recovery to the longer-term business continuity efforts. It shows those operational challenges and the financial impact.
It highlights that even with the best plans, disruptions can be costly.
Oh, hey, and insurance can only help so much.
Exactly. It's not a magic bullet.
Okay, so this all leads us to business impact analysis, or BIA. Can you explain what BIA is and why it's such a critical step?
BIA is all about figuring out the potential consequences of disruptions to your most important business functions, processes, and systems. It helps you understand how much of an impact it would have if different parts of your business were suddenly unable to operate.
So it's about understanding those ripple effects. If one thing goes down, what else gets affected?
Precisely. And a well-executed BIA lets you prioritize your recovery efforts by pinpointing those functions that are absolutely essential.
Okay.
And it helps you understand the dependencies between those functions. It's a foundational step in creating effective BCPs and DRPs because it gives you the data you need to make informed decisions about your recovery strategies.
You need to know where to focus your energy.
Exactly.
Now, the article says that BIA is similar to risk assessment, but with a different emphasis.
Yeah, there's overlap, but the focus is a bit different.
Risk assessment looks at what could happen, while BIA focuses on the importance and urgency of each business function.
Right.
But it also mentions that you can integrate the two.
Absolutely, and it makes a lot of sense to do that.
So how does that integration typically work?
So risk assessment identifies the what could go wrong, all the possible disruptive events. BIA then tackles the so what happens if this specific disruption occurs, which functions need to stay up and running no matter what, and what are the consequences if they don't?
It's connecting those dots.
Exactly. Linking the likelihood of a risk event to the potential impact on your most vital activities.
Okay, so the article outlines 3 main reasons for doing a BIA.
Okay.
1, to identify critical functions and their recovery timeframes.
Right.
2, to assess recovery needs and potential impacts.
Right.
And 3, to make sure those potential impacts align with the organization's risk appetite.
Exactly.
That all makes sense.
It's about understanding what you absolutely need to keep running, how quickly you need to get things back online, what resources you need for that recovery, and whether the potential consequences of an outage are within your acceptable risk levels.
It's a reality check.
It is.
The article also mentions the 4 Ps that BIA often looks at.
Right.
People, processes, premises, and products.
Yeah, the 4 pillars.
But it says there's a big emphasis on business processes. Why is that?
Because those core processes are usually what drive value creation for the organization.
Okay.
They're what you need to keep running to meet the needs of your stakeholders, maintain your reputation, and safeguard your overall value. If those processes get disrupted, it can have huge negative consequences.
It's the heart of the business.
Exactly.
Now, the key components of a BIA are listed as critical activities, impact assessment, recovery time objectives, RTOs, recovery point objectives, RPOs, and identifying critical dependencies. Do you break down those key terms for us?
Of course. Your RTO is how much time you have to restore a business function before it starts causing serious problems.
Okay.
Your RPO is how much data loss you can tolerate. Understanding these two is crucial for creating effective recovery strategies.
So you know what you can afford to lose.
Exactly. And then you've got dependencies, which are all those things you rely on to deliver your essential functions, like systems, suppliers, and key personnel. You need to understand those dependencies to identify any potential bottlenecks in your recovery process.
It's about knowing your weak points.
Yeah, and having backups.
Okay, so overall, BIA is about prioritizing resources for business continuity, guiding the development of those BCPs and DRPs, minimizing downtime during disruptions, and supporting the organization's overall risk management.
It's the foundation of effective business continuity planning.
Okay, so let's circle back to the relationship between BCM and ERM.
Okay.
The article really stresses that BCP is a vital part of the larger ERM framework.
Right, they're two sides of the same coin.
Earlier, we talked about how they fit together, but can you go deeper into that integration? How do they create a truly robust framework for organizational resilience?
So ERM gives you that big picture view of all the risks you face.
Okay.
BCP then takes those specific risks that could interrupt your operations and develops actionable plans.
So it's like a strategic partnership.
Exactly. ERM might identify, say, a cyber attack as a major threat. BCP then provides that detailed disaster recovery plan and those business continuity procedures to deal with that attack. They both share that goal of protecting the organization's core processes and its stakeholders.
They're both working towards the same end goal.
Absolutely. And they complement each other beautifully. ERM is focused on preventing bad things from happening, while BCP makes sure you can keep going when those preventative measures don't work.
It's about having a safety net.
Exactly. And when you integrate them seamlessly, you create a much stronger resilience posture for the organization.
You're ready for anything.
Exactly. ERM helps you understand the threats and their potential impact, while BCP gives you the plans to actually keep things running and recover quickly.
It's a powerful combination.
It is, and it not only reduces the potential damage, both financial and reputational, but it also helps you get back to normal operations much faster.
It's about minimizing that downtime.
So-
The article uses the example of a pharmaceutical company that absolutely needs to keep those essential medications flowing, highlighting how both ERM and BCP are crucial in that context.
Right, a great example.
It shows how those two disciplines work together in a very real way. The article also talks about the role of scenario planning in both BCP and ERM.
Yeah, scenario planning is super important.
It's about imagining those what-if situations, right?
Exactly. You develop and analyze different potential events, including those low probability but high impact crises. It's a great way to build resilience into both ERM and BCP. The stress tests that financial institutions do are a great example of scenario planning in action.
It's like a fire drill for the whole organization.
Exactly.
Okay, so finally, the article touches on societal resilience and the role of governments in promoting it.
Okay.
How do individual organizations contribute to that broader societal resilience through their business continuity efforts?
By having good business continuity standards, organizations can set minimum levels of resilience for their critical systems. They're ensuring they can still function during major events.
So it's about raising the bar for everyone.
Exactly. And when those plans include specific timeframes for restoring services, it helps the whole community recover faster. Local governments often play a key role in ensuring business continuity during emergencies.
Right.
And it's worth noting that ISO 2300 is specifically designed to address societal security and resilience.
It's about working together.
Exactly.
And it's interesting how businesses can actually become resources for local authorities during emergencies.
No, great.
We can provide equipment, goods, even temporary shelter.
Absolutely. And when businesses have their own continuity plans, it takes some of the pressure off those local authorities during a crisis.
It's a win-win situation.
It really is. And for small businesses, it's crucial to focus on identifying their biggest threats and protecting those critical assets, like their premises, machinery, and equipment. That's what's going to keep them running in the long term.
It's about survival.
Yeah, and it contributes to the resilience of the whole local economy.
Okay, so let's wrap it up. We've really covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about how our understanding of resilience has changed over time, the core principles of BCM, how it all fits into the ERM framework, the importance of standards and guidelines, the practical steps involved in creating BCPs, the lessons learned from the pandemic, the importance of BIA, and ultimately how BCM and ERM work together to build strong organizations and even stronger societies.
We covered a lot, and I think the key takeaway is that understanding these concepts can help you navigate an increasingly complex world, whether you're thinking about your organization or even your own personal life.
It's about being prepared for anything.
Exactly.
So here's a final thought to leave you with.
Okay.
Given how interconnected everything is these days,
Uh-huh.
what's the most unexpected disruption that could really impact your work or your area of interest? And what could you or your organization do right now to lessen the impact? It's definitely something worth thinking about.
A great question. And in today's constantly changing landscape, those principles of resilience and proactive business continuity planning are only going to become more and more important.
It's about being one step ahead.
It is.
Well, on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for having me.